Guys.
Good morning. Appreciate you streaming on in here on Burst 365 with McMullen. I'm McDonald. Appreciate your joining us. Look who's joining us. The former general manager of the Washington Redskins, now host of the Vinny and Haney show on 105.7 The Fan down in Baltimore, Charm City's own Vinny Cerrato. How you been, Vin, man?
I'm good. I'm on vacation. I'm in Long Beach Island. I'm sure you've been there, Jody.
Nice. LBI up here on the Jersey Shore?
Yeah. Yes.
That's very nice. All right.
Very nice.
A little too crowded this time of year, though, Benny. A little too crowded. I don't like the crowds. I'm an off-season guy.
that probably is not a bad idea. We were at Atlantic City the other day fishing. Caught 34 flounder.
Nice. Damn.
Ooh.
So you're eating good in the neighborhood these days. I'll tell you my quick best LBI story ever. Like the first year I moved down here to South Jersey, went to Long Beach Island, had friends from both New York and Philadelphia, which is right there in the middle of the Jersey Shore. So you get New Yorkers and you get knuckleheads coming up from Baltimore like Vinny Cerrato. Labor Day weekend, the NFL way back when in the 90s used to still play in Labor Day weekend. Eagles Giants open up the season, and I'm in the best sports bar on Long Beach Island. The trash talking, the beer throwing, the fighting. I was like the best Labor Day Sunday I ever had because it was the Eagles versus the Giants. A hell of a lot of fun.
You probably felt like you were just in Eagles Stadium.
Yeah, or MetLife. No, it wasn't even MetLife. It was Giant Stadium at the time because I knew both markets and had friends in both markets. So we had a great time. I hope you have a great time too. All right, so after this, you got to go back to work. And the Ravens season is going to get underway shortly thereafter. You were there for all the spring practices and the like. Lamar gets the deal done. Oh, by the way, Jalen Hurts says you're welcome for getting his deal done so that the Ravens could get Lamar's deal done. All copacetic there. Everybody on the same page. No bad feelings of having to play the whole year the way they did last year. Is everybody on the right page in Baltimore?
Yeah, that's the way negotiations go. Everybody hates each other, goes back and forth, and then everybody loves each other once the deal gets done. And I tell you what, Lamar looks like last year, he didn't look like he was having fun and he was engaged. I thought the last 8 games of the season, guys, I thought they got Lamar the agent. I think he was making business decisions. Now, he's happy. He's talking to receivers. He's like he was in 19. He just looks like he's engaged and enjoying himself.
Well, that check will do it, Benny. Jalen Hurts up here. Yeah, he was the highest paid player in the NFL for 4 days because that's how it works. And then all of a sudden, Lamar Jackson takes over. So Lamar, the agent, did the job. He had a lot of criticism, but he got it done in the end. Ultimately,
I mean, he got the same deal that they offered him basically in the summertime.
Yeah.
I think what he found out was after the Jalen Hurts deal that there was not going to be,
Deshaun Watson. Yeah, that complicated everything.
There was not going to be all that guaranteed money. And once he came off the guaranteed money, then the deal got done quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Baltimore as a whole, Benny, is an interesting team to me because they're good. But the AFC's got a bunch of good teams. So, like, if I put Baltimore in the NFC, I go, that's a contender. That's a legit Super Bowl contender. I don't know in the AFC. Where do they see themselves moving forward?
I think they're going to be really good. But, I mean, if you just take the AFC North, I mean, we talk about it all the time. You look at the North, you can make a case for any team to win the division. Yeah. And because the biggest question mark in the division is what Deshaun Watson are we getting? Right. That's the key. Are we getting the Houston one or are we getting the one from last year? And that's going to be the key to Cleveland. But the Ravens, when you look at the Ravens, I mean, quarterback, good. Running backs are good. Great tight ends. Got depth at receiver now. They got a very good offensive line. So, I mean, offensively, they're really good. And in the secondary, 3 of the 4 are studs. They got 2 great inside linebackers. Inside defensive line's pretty good. The pass rushers are going to be the key. Ajabo and Oweh, that is going to be the key. If they're – and let me just say this. Ajabo, he looks – I don't know if you guys watched him at Michigan when he had his 15 sacks or whatever, but, I mean, that's how he looks.
That's they're going to need him to step up and be big right off the back. You mentioned 2 good inside linebackers. And, oh, by the way, they used their second-round draft pick on an inside linebacker as well. Last year, they decided not to pick up the 5th-year option on Patrick Queen, who progressively got better over his 3 years. First-year rookie, first-round draft pick, not great. Showed improvement year 2, made a major step up last year in year number 3. Is it a given that Patrick Queen is going to be staying with the Ravens, or is there a possibility that if somebody jumps up and offers them something, they'd be willing to move Patrick Queen?
Well, you know what? Like talking to their guys and stuff, the biggest problem with the inside linebackers with the 5th-year option, it's the same as the outside backers. So there was not one inside backer 5th-year option picked up. Now, Queen, I see Queen as a Robin. And I see Roquan as the Batman, because when Roquan came in, all of a sudden Queen became really good. And I think what happened was it allowed Queen to do what he does well. I mean, he run blitzes well, he blitzes the passer well, and just kind of runs to the football. Whereas Roquan could kind of be his kind of bodyguard to take care of the things when he's blitzing and stuff. Roquan, to me, Roquan's the leader of that defense by far. I mean, he's the green dot guy. Like when I was out at practice at football school, you know, they didn't have jerseys on then. And, you know, I didn't know what guys looked like because I hadn't seen, you know, if they don't have their jersey on, we don't know who they are. So Roquan was easy to pick out. He was the one doing all the talking and telling everybody. He was acting like a coach out there. Now, speaking of coaches, I mean, they had 2 huge additions. Offensively, Todd Monken. You guys would love Monken. When he's out on the field, he runs it all. He's loud. He'll holler. He'll swear. He'll do whatever he feels. He reminds me of Mike Shanahan, the way he is on the field during practice, because the coaches, like, they kind of talk to their players in the huddle. Whereas when the play's going on and everything, Todd Monken is coaching everything. So he's got a receiver background. So he's telling the receivers what to do. Exactly. Because he's so detailed. He wants everything perfectly. You know, if they're supposed to be 18 yards deep, be 18. If not, he's on them. Because what he's doing is he's coaching the coaches too. And he's got a bunch of young coaches. And Mike Shanahan told me back when I was in San Fran, I don't need a bunch of guys to tell me, you know, how to coach football. I just need some guys to, you know, coach their individual position. Young guys. In San Fran, we had all young coaches. He said, I just need a great O-line coach. We had Bob McKittrick, and Bob, you know, would call the run plays, and then Mike took care of the offense. And I think that's kind of how Todd is, and that's how it looks out on the field. And it looks much better, you know, than it has been in the past, just because, I mean, I had one of their executives told me, seen more passes today than I saw in a month, you know, with Greg Roman.
Hey, Greg. I want to rewind. I want you to put on your executive hat, Vinny. The reason we brought up Queen, the reason why Jody went that direction, one of the few weaknesses on the Eagles is off-ball linebacker, at least on paper. And you see somebody not getting that 5th-year option picked up, and you see him draft a kid in the 3rd round, Simpson, as a potential replacement down the road. Is there any way August comes around and they say, let's get something for Queen while we can? Let's try to go in that direction. I see you shaking your head now.
No way. I mean, Eric has told me that DaCosta, their GM, that I'm not in the business of giving away good football players. And that would make no sense because they probably have the best inside backer group in the league. And, you know, Queen is playing. I mean, he looked great at the mini camps and OTAs and stuff. So, no, I mean, that's one of their biggest strengths. And Simpson's not ready. I mean, You don't even notice him. You know, he wears jersey 30. And I always ask Bob Haney, who's my partner on the show, you know, did you notice? You know, you don't even notice him. Whereas Queen, he's not. He's probably a year away. He needs to learn. He just, you know, he runs 4.4, but right now he's playing like he's like 4.8 because he's got to think too much. And they don't need that. And especially when you've got 3 of their first 5 games are division games on the road.
A tough way to open up. All right, you mentioned depth at the wide receiver for the Ravens, Vinny. Part of that is the young man they drafted in the first round, Zay Flowers from Boston College. I'll be honest, not one of the wide receivers. He got grabbed in that wide receiver run in the draft this past year. A whole bunch of them went back to back to back to back, and Flowers was one of them. Tell us why this kid is going to be able to step in and play as a first-year NFL starter. I'm not as big a fan. Anything you saw that tells you, yeah, he'll be good year one?
I loved him, Jody. And, you know, and I talked to Mel Kiper a lot. He's been a friend for years, and that was Mel's favorite receiver too. I thought Zay Flowers best receiver in the draft. And, Jody, when you see him out there, he's so quick, he's explosive, and he can make people miss. He plays bigger than his 5'9". Like, he plays bigger. Like Marquise Brown, they were basically the same size, but Marquise played small. Marquise was the type of receiver that when he'd get the ball, he'd run out of bounds or fall down. You know, like the old St. Louis receivers used to do all the time. But Zay Flowers, he's going to make people miss. And last year, the Ravens, I think they were worst in the league with yak yards. And Zay Flowers is a yak guy. Bateman's a yak guy. And Odell's a yak guy. And, you know, the tight ends are yak people. So they're going to get a lot more yak yards. And how about last year, the running backs, I think they had about 20-some catches for the season. The biggest difference is if you look at Cincinnati, they had 1,000 or 800 yak yards just from the 2 backs. 800. The Ravens had 100. You know, so I mean, Lamar's gonna pick up a lot of easy yards because they're gonna have 5 receivers in a pattern. They're gonna have a lot of quick screen, and they're gonna have the ability to let those guys make plays for him after the catch. Because Lamar doesn't need to be running for 1,000 yards. I say he throws for 4 and then rushes for like 700. I think that would be more ideal for the Ravens.
You know, Benny, when I've watched Lamar over the years, I've always been impressed with his ability to get the football to the tight ends. Now, partially that's due to Andrews, who's a tremendous player, but it's been other guys as well. I know they lost Josh Oliver, who's I think a really underrated player that people don't realize. But you mentioned Flowers, Bateman, Beckham, our old buddy Nelson Aguilar's down there. All of a sudden, they got all these receivers. Is that playing up to his strengths, though? Because I like him in the middle of the field. He has dominated with those tight ends over the years.
Yeah, but I got different offensive coordinator also, you know, who will throw the ball to the receiver. Because the thing that I liked about Todd Monken is he says, I got to figure out what everybody does best. And then that's what I'm going to have them do. Same with Lamar. Lamar, what does Lamar do best? And that's what I'm do. Like with Zay Flowers, Jody, he says, I got to get Zay Flowers the ball in space. You know, so I got to find ways to get him the ball. He's going to be the jet sweep guy and all that because he's got that type of skill. Now, your buddy Aguilar, I think kind of the drop stuff kind of came up a little bit, you know, towards minicamp.
It will come up, Benny.
Yes. You know, because here's the thing is Aguilar and Duvernay are going for 4 and 5. But Duvernay's cap number is 4 something and Aguilar's 3. And I don't see how you can pay 4 and 5, you know, $7 million of cap dollars for your 4th and 5th receivers.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out. All right. What's OBJ's attitude? Because I knew him forever in New York.
Yeah.
Goes to the Ram, gets the championship belt, holds out all last year. I thought Jerry was going to sign him at least twice last year, and it never came to fruition. Ends up signing and gets what he wants. Lamar signs and stays in Baltimore. He's as talented a player as there is, but at times I talked to a lot of guys that said he wasn't the best guy to have in a locker room, and his attitude needed major adjustment. How good has it been since getting to Baltimore?
Well, he's only been there for the mini camp, so he was there to 3 days. He was at his press conference. I went to that. He said all the right things there. And, Todd Monken had him in Cleveland for the year there. So he knew him. And right now he's all in. We'll see if he's not catching balls and doing those types of things. But I would say this, Jody, watching him, it was the first time he'd put on a jersey since the Super Bowl. So he was cautious, which is normal coming off ACL. And I think we'll see a different guy come the fall, because I asked him at the press conference, are you going to be at OTAs? He says, we don't play till September. So that kind of told you, what he thought was going to happen, what you thought was going to happen in OTAs and minicamp. But he took more reps than I thought, he would. And then it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out come training camp. I think he'll be heavily involved. Like, they play the Eagles first preseason game, and then the following Tuesday and Wednesday they have Washington there for 2 days of practice. I think that's going to be the big thing for the number ones for Lamar, for that offense, because nobody plays preseason games anymore.
Yeah, no.
So these practices,
and they're having their joint practices. The
joint practices that's going to be the best thing. Jody, were you at the one when the Ravens went up to the Eagles like a few years back?
No, didn't make that practice.
I was.
Yeah. Does Harbaugh win all the joint practices too? Because we know he never loses a preseason game. Nick Sirianni likes to brag that he never loses a joint practice. This could be World War III. Ravens and Eagles joint practices this summer.
Hey, Benny, you know who I was in awe of when the Ravens were here? The Ravens come here a lot. Way back when Darren Waller was a 6th-round pick, they were up here. Yeah. So that was years ago. You could tell then that guy was killing the Eagles with contested catches, but he was a tight end back then. A wide receiver coming out of college, and then they shifted him to tight end later. But the guy who I'm in awe of when I watch him when he comes up here, Tucker. It's unbelievable, the ball coming off his foot. It is unbelievable. It's just different than any other kicker I've ever seen. It's
what's funny is I was at the Texas A&M game when he won that kick and beat A&M. So I had known of Justin Tucker because Mac Brown was the head coach at Texas at the time, and I was sitting with his wife in the box. But Justin Tucker, he's so consistent. It's like, when I was in San Francisco, we had Gary Anderson, and like when we'd line up to kick a field goal, I'd go get something to eat or whatever because it's going to be good. And that's the same with Tucker. Yeah. It's like if he misses, you're shocked.
Yeah. Gary had the first perfect season in NFL history, and then it evaporated in the NFC Championship game. That was I was at that. That was a tough loss for Minnesota. I was covering the Vikings at the time, but Vinny, I wanted, before you popped on here, Jody and I were talking about Nick Sirianni, how he's handled Quez Watkins, young player coming off a bad year, and he tried to go out of his way in the spring and sort of prop him up. When you're a GM, vice president of football ops, you see your coach do that. Is there a fine line? You want to prop a guy up? You want to be honest? I'm always surprised when fans expect coaches to rip guys. There's no upside to that. Now, occasionally you get an old school guy like Parcells, we'll call the player she or something like that, who has this old gruff mentality, but those guys don't exist anymore. If they do, it's very, very rare.
Yeah. You got to play the mind games because, a lot of that game is between the ears. Yeah, and confidence is a huge factor. Guy can play so much faster and everything else if he's got a clean mind. And the biggest thing is if you're confident in yourself and you just see a different guy, you know. So Joe Gibbs never yelled at players, you know, either. Joe was always, you know, patting them on the back, encouraging them, because, you know, what good does it do you to yell at? Plus, the thing what good coaches do is they know what makes each player tick. So, you know, like Clinton Portis with Joe Gibbs. Clinton was the type of guy, and Jim Zorn learned this, that you can't embarrass him in front of other people.
Yeah.
When Joe ever had a problem with Clinton, he would just call him into his office and they would talk in the office. Where Jim Zorn, you know, attacked him on the field, and then Clinton shut it down and then wanted to be traded and, you know, just caused a lot of problems. So you got to know how to handle each player. And you know what I would always tell our coaches, you know, like when you're talking to a press conference, you know who you're talking to. The people you're talking to are your players. They're on that Monday press conference, you know, when the coaches, you're talking to the coaches or the players' families. The players are listening. The girlfriends are listening. That's who you're talking to. That's the message, that because John Harbaugh never rips a player. I mean, you listen to him on a Monday, never rips a player. Always talks positive about every player. Some coaches don't get that. And then, you know what? Then you got problems when you come back on Tuesday or Wednesday, you know, because then all of a sudden, you know, the coach ripped me and he doesn't believe in me. And then it's just one problem after another.
I got another ex-general manager question for you, Vinny. I don't know if you did the Long Beach Island thing when you were actually the man in charge of the Redskins, but this summer downtime, no practice, no games, no nothing. But you know that there's just one phone call away from your season falling into disrepair because somebody got in trouble somewhere doing something. Did you turn your ringer down on your cell phone when you got away for a couple of weeks during the summer? How many hours of sleep did you lose wondering about, is tonight the night I get the phone call that one of my guys?
It's happened, you know. When you get the call, like if it's late at night or early in the morning, you know, then it's usually not good at all.
Right.
I mean, because I remember when Dan Snyder called me like 5 o'clock in the morning about Sean Taylor. You know, that was 5 a.m. And then in the summertime, one time I was out running, got a call. One of the players got in trouble, you know, and it's like, Jesus, you know, I mean, it just never ends. You don't want to get that call, right, you know, in the summertime, because you get enough of them during the season.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, you can't sleep during the season.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you were telling us before about Dan Snyder calling you up. Now, obviously, in that tragic situation, but just in general, how he would sort of call you up in early in the morning or whatever it was,
no, late at night. Yeah, early in the morning, like 2, 3 in the morning.
Yeah. How much do you think, we're going back a while, but you know, one of your former teams, Washington, it looks like finally they're going to move on from Daniel Snyder. It looks like it's going to be approved. Josh Harris, who we know well in Philadelphia, owns the Sixers. New regime. How important is it going to be for that organization? Because they've been through a lot with Dan. They've been through a lot.
I think it's big just because the fan base, I mean, they needed a divorce, you know, and Dan needed a divorce. The fans needed a divorce because they can't get a new stadium. They can't get a lot of things, you know, and fans aren't going to the games. So they just need it re-energized. That's what they need. And, you know, Josh Harris, he's going to get an opportunity. I mean, coming in there now, the fan base, they're going to be all fired up for new ownership, and we'll see what he does. I mean, you know, he's Rivera, they'll stay for a year, but then all owners like to get
they want to get their own guys.
Yep.
Well, let me ask you about the outgoing owner. What do you think he's going to do with the rest of his life? Now, he don't have to do anything. He'd stay out there on his yacht in the Mediterranean Sea if he so desires, but he's still a relatively young man. You knew him. You took 3 o'clock in the morning phone calls from him. What do you think Dan Snyder's going to do when he's not the owner of the Washington football team?
Well, he's going to have about $5 billion, Jody. And
nice place to start.
Yeah, it's a nice place. Yeah.
So you don't have a lot of problems. You got that $100 million yacht. I think he may live in London, from what people told me.
Yeah, he spends most of his time, it seems, over in Europe now.
And he's got.
I didn't know if that was to avoid Congress or if he wants to live there. But yeah, it's interesting. It's good. You know, the NFL as a whole. I got to ask you this, Vinny. Jody and I've been, and this last one from me. Make sure you follow Vinny on Twitter. Vinny and Rob at Vinny and Rob, CBS Sports Radio down in Baltimore. But the gambling policy, boy, man, this is. I mean, it's really difficult from the NFL's perspective because they're in bed. They want to make money off it, and all of a sudden you're suspending guys for 6 games a year. The education hasn't been great. And the reason I know that is because they had a conference call with us reporters about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. It's like, why wasn't this going on before all the suspensions? Typically, I think the NFL's got a difficult job. Most of the punishment is CBA, negotiated. I think a lot of fans don't understand that. But in this one instance, Vinny, I think there's room for more common sense with the league. But there's a little hypocrisy going on. These are young kids. If they're betting on NBA games in the parking lot, why not say, hey, knucklehead, you can't do that. Fine them. And then if they do it again, then you go zero-sum punishment. Where are you on the gambling issue in the NFL?
Well, I mean, you guys have been in stadiums and stuff, in locker rooms. I mean, there's signs everywhere, about the game. Been there forever.
Yeah. Well, NFL games, I think, is different. But because they allow – yeah.
They just don't want them betting. I guess betting in the facility, even employees betting in the facility, they don't want, because they don't want information leaked.
Yep.
Like injury information. And if a guy's betting, I'm sure people can track if a guy's betting, okay, he must know something. I think going in hard on them, I don't think it's a bad thing. I know Eric DaCosta at the start of minicamp, he talked to the whole team and went through it all and everything, and explained to them again, about the do's and don'ts, what you can and what you can't do. So I mean, it's pretty common sense. I mean, if you're a player, it's pretty common sense that you don't bet on NFL games. And
I was more in. Look, I'm 100% with you with NFL games. I was more in guys are getting suspended. They're allowed to bet on NBA games, NHL games, whatever, as long as it's outside the team facility, team hotel, things like that. That's the kind of stuff I was more talking about. I think there's more room to say, hey, do one of two. Say you can't bet on anything. I'd be all behind that. Mm-hmm. Can't bet.
Right.
Then you got to deal with the hypocrisy aspect that you're making money off it, but that's for the league to deal with. But if you're going to allow them, I think there's got to be a little wiggle room. Look, if you're betting on NFL games, boom, year suspension. No problem with that. The other stuff I got a little bit of a problem with.
I don't totally disagree with you at all because, the league, they're all about money. I mean, we know that every decision they make, it's about, how can they make money? And when they got in bed with the gambling, then you knew you were going to have issues. You knew it. And I tend to agree with you, like with the Williams kid from the Lions. He was betting college, and he got suspended 6 games. I could see, first time offense kind of thing with, you're betting on college. All right, get a game or, slap them on the wrist a little bit. But if you're betting on, pro games, I think that's what Ridley did, right? That's why he missed the year. Yeah. So I don't totally disagree with you.
Here's where I would like to see it go, and I think there's almost no chance of it going. They never negotiate when the CBA is not due, and the CBA is not due for years to come. But they have a new head of the union. Let's see if he can make his chops a little bit and go in and negotiate something. As John pointed out, most of the penalties are already decided. They're already written out in the CBA. Why don't you have that with the way I understand it's exploding and the way that it's gone from here to here because of the amount of legalized gambling that's been passed in the country? Put it in the CBA, negotiate it out now, so you don't have guys like Jody McDonald and John McMullen and Vinny Cerrato talking about it on a YouTube show as to how much they should be suspended. Just negotiate it out. Yeah, I don't think that'll get done, but that would make sense. All right, Vinny, last one for me. How's your son doing? The hockey prodigy. What's he up to these days? How'd his first year at Michigan go?
No, he's not at Michigan yet. He was still at the U.S. team, and he's going to do a year in the USHL before he goes to college.
Okay.
And he was the Youngstown won the USHL this year, and Youngstown wanted Charlie. They had the last pick of the draft, so Madison had the first pick. So they traded 3 draft picks and 3 players to move up to number 1 to take Charlie. So he's going to be playing for Youngstown.
Nice.
And Jody,
3 picks and 3 players. They'll always have that on the resume.
Yeah. So they had main camp like 2 weeks ago, which was fun. I went and watched, so it was good. And so you know what I did, because he's going to be in Youngstown. I called Carmen Policy and I called Eddie DeBartolo, you know, because they're both Youngstown guys.
Yeah.
And the guy that owns half of the Youngstown team, Carmen Policy, represented him way back when, you know. So they'll be looking out for him.
Very nice. Now, when does he become NHL draft eligible?
Next year he'll be ready.
Next year. Okay, good. Well, we're going to have you on plenty between now and then, including probably after the Ravens and Eagles throw down in joint practice. Could be the war to end all wars.
The Ravens have joint practice with Washington.
Yeah, it's Cleveland. The Eagles are Cleveland and
they're
Indy
not doing the Ravens this year?
No.
They usually do the Ravens. Huh? The Ravens have been here so many times.
What happened was Chip Kelly changed, like when everything they had agreed on when the Ravens were up there practicing, Chip Kelly changed everything, did everything how he wanted to do it. Yeah. And Harbs was done with him after that.
Sirianni's a good dude.
By the way, that was the
Sirianni would be into it.
That was the Darren Waller year. Darren Waller just killed the Eagles. Yeah, and I said, who's this kid? He was a 6th-round pick out of Georgia Tech, and he was just destroying them. I'll never forget it.
Well, Johnny, you better hope he doesn't kill the Eagles this year, because he's on the Giants now. They're gonna get a chance to see Darren Waller twice this year.
Yeah.
Vinny, enjoy the rest of your vacay. If you get back out there, may you catch 30 more fish. Have a big fish fry on us. You know we're going to be reaching back to you again real soon. Thanks for jumping in today, buddy.
No problem, guys.
Thanks, Vinny.
Vinny Cerrato from 105.7 The Fan down in Baltimore, the Vinny and Haney show every day in the middays, and former NFL executive.
Nobody liked Chip except Bill Belichick. That's it.
And he just liked to pick his brain and say, all right, now you can leave. Hey, bring him in, pick his brain for 3 or 4 hours.
It's always those joint practices. Vinny jogging my memory of Darren Waller. There's always somebody. I remember, obviously Tom Brady, when New England was here, I'll never forget it, because they were for anybody who's been at the Novacare complex, they have like 3 fields. They were in the barred field to the right, and they were doing one-on-ones, receivers against defensive backs. And I was about 3 feet away, because you can get really close there. And I've never heard so many expletives in my life, because Brady was just pinpoint. And every Eagles defensive back would come back just with F-bombs. And it was something to see.
Was Slay not there yet?
No, he was not there.
Yeah, he was not there yet, because had that happened, I think he would have turned an ankle, because when Slay gets beat badly in a non-regular season game, somehow he miraculously turns up with an injury. What Tyreek Hill did to him a couple of years ago down there.
I was not as close for the Tyreek Hill. I think Brandon Boykin might have been the best cornerback at that time. So
on the Eagles, damn, that's saying something. No wonder Brady completed all those
Yeah.
passes in a row. We're stocked full with cornerbacks who
But they were right on the. I mean, you talk about accuracy, Jody. Never seen a more accurate quarterback. And I saw Sam Bradford. Sam Bradford's close, but
that's why he is considered the GOAT. I'm going to give you another guy who was considered the GOAT, at least in one man's eyes, when we come back. Greatest coach of all time, according to an ex-Eagle. Really? I will give you details on that when we come back. Got a good guest joining us in hour number 2. That'd be Les Bowens. Going to jump in with Mac and Mac, so keep it right here on Birds 365.